Welcome to the Explainer. So, today we're taking on what is arguably the biggest, most emotionally charged financial debate of our entire lives, right? Renting versus buying. We are going to completely dismantle a massive, long standing housing myth, and we're doing it with nothing but cold, hard math. So, let's just forget the feelings for a second and dive right into the actual numbers to see what really builds wealth.
Because, we've all heard it. Renting is throwing money away. Your Uncle Dave has probably loudly declared it at a family dinner, right? Well, let's actually test this theory with a perfectly balanced scenario. Meet Brian and Rachel. Now, on paper, they're identical. They both earn $90,000 a year, they both have exactly $50,000 in savings, and they live in the exact same city. But on one very ordinary Tuesday, they take two completely different paths.
Brian? Well, Brian decides to buy. He grabs a medium-priced $415,000 house, puts 10% down at a 6.5% interest rate. On day one, he signs, probably 40 documents, hands over another $10,000 in closing costs, which, let's be honest, he kind of forgot to budget for, gets a shiny new key, and throws a massive housewarming party. Rachel, on the flip side, rents the exact identical house right down the street. Her day one, she gets a confirmation email. No key ceremony, zero fanfare. But here is the absolutely critical difference. She takes that $41,500 down payment plus the $10,000 in closing costs that Brian just burned through, and she drops that entire $51,000 chunk into a boring total market index fund.
Fast forward a bit and let's look at the visible monthly comparison. This is the number everyone stares at, right? Brian proudly points to his $2,360 monthly principal and interest payment, and he compares it to Rachel's $2,000 rent check. He's smiling because in his mind, his payment is building equity, while Rachel's cash is just evaporating into thin air. Honestly, it feels like a massive, obvious win for Brian.
But hold on, here is a massive reality check. That mortgage payment? It's really just the down payment on what a house actually costs to operate. When we build out Brian's true monthly expenses, we have to factor in property taxes, which is about 1% of the home's value, adding $350. Then there's homeowner's insurance at $200, and wow, that's been spiking lately. Plus, because he put down less than 20%, he gets hit with a private mortgage insurance penalty of $150. And finally, maintenance. You add all of that up, and it pushes his true monthly carrying cost to a whopping $3,400.
Actually, let's pause on that maintenance figure for a second because it is devastating. The general rule of thumb is that maintenance costs 1 to 2% of the house's value every single year. But as the old saying goes, the roof does not care what month it is, the roof has a calendar. Maintenance doesn't just arrive as a polite, tidy $340 monthly bill. Nope. It arrives as an $8,000 roof replacement or a water heater that suddenly just dies in the freezing cold of February. These are guaranteed 4- and 5-figure hits, and Brian's name is the only one on the invoice. So this creates an absolutely crucial gap between their monthly lives. Rachel's all-in cost is just $2,015, and that even includes her renter's insurance. This unlocks a hidden $1,400 difference every single month. So picture this. While Brian is standing in his kitchen at 10 p.m., arguing with a plumber, Rachel is quietly, automatically funneling that extra $1,400 gap straight into her index funds, month after month.
Now, before you assume Brian just bought a total money pit, let me empower you with a 10-second math formula. You can literally use this right now to calculate the true unrecoverable cost of owning any home in your specific zip code. It's called the 5% rule. You take the price of the home, multiply it by 5%, and divide that by 12. On Brian's $415,000 house, that's about $1,700 a month in purely unrecoverable costs. We're talking taxes, interest, insurance, upkeep. Bottom line, if you can rent the same place for less than that number, renting technically wins on paper.
So let's look at how this break-even race plays out chronologically over the next decade. In year one, Rachel is clearly leading the pack. By year three, her portfolio is sitting at roughly $80,000. Brian has built a tiny sliver of equity, sure, but in the early years of a 30-year fixed mortgage, you are mostly just, renting money from the bank. Almost none of your payment touches the loan principal. Plus, if he tried to sell at year three, a 5 to 6% realtor exit toll would completely wipe out whatever equity he had anyway. It's not until year 6 or 7 that they finally tie, and by year 10, they're standing on mathematically even ground.
But look at the reality of year 10 here. While their net worth might be similar, how they got there is vastly different. Brian is emotionally and financially chained to one asset and one zip code, having lost countless weekends fighting gutters and making hardware store runs. He bought heavy, expensive roots. Rachel, meanwhile, she owns a slice of 500 different companies. She bought absolute mechanical optionality. If she gets a dream job offer across the country, she gives 30 days notice and literally moves on a Tuesday. Brian has to sell an entire house first.
Now, if I stopped there, it wouldn't be a totally fair or complete picture. We absolutely have to acknowledge Brian's enormous weapon here: leverage. Leverage is basically controlling a massive asset with a very small amount of borrowed money. Because Brian controls a $415,000 asset with just his $41,000 down payment, a mere 4% rise in the home's value means the bank's money is heavily compounding his personal wealth. That is an incredible advantage that Rachel's stock portfolio just doesn't natively have.
And Brian has a few other massive advantages too. He gets significant tax breaks, like up to $500,000 in completely tax-free profit if he sells as a married couple. Plus, his core mortgage payment is frozen forever. It never goes up. Rachel, however, is facing silent 4% annual rent hikes on every single renewal letter, and she has to stomach terrifying market volatility. Her index fund doesn't just go straight up. She has to endure 30% cliff drops in the stock market without panicking and locking in her losses.
Which brings us to the great myth of the housing market. Everyone kind of assumes real estate is this unstoppable rocket ship. But historically, once you strip out inflation, American home prices only appreciate about 1% a year over the long run. Just 1%. Stocks over that exact same century returned about 7% a year after inflation. So when you run the math with that honest historical 1% number, Rachel doesn't just tie Brian over a 20-year span, she actually pulls ahead.
There's also a hidden risk here, one that is literally never printed on a real estate brochure: the danger of the undiversified asset. Think about it. Brian's entire net worth is chained to one street, in one town, tied to one local job market. If a major employer leaves or a storm parks itself over his roof, his one asset takes the full hit. Rachel's wealth is spread across 500 global companies. She wouldn't even flinch if one of those companies went bankrupt on a Wednesday. So if the math is so closely matched or even slightly favors renting on paper, we have to ask the million-dollar question. Why is the typical homeowner worth nearly 40 times the typical renter? Well, this introduces a massive behavioral plot twist that just ruins the perfect math on the spreadsheet. In the real world, most renters simply do not have Rachel's ironclad discipline. The median renter blows that $1,400 monthly gap on takeout, nicer cars, and weekend trips instead of religiously investing it. And that brings us right to the homebuyer's real secret weapon. A mortgage is essentially the ultimate forced savings plan. You aren't allowed to skip it unless you want to lose your home, right? It forces Brian to build wealth every single month, essentially by mandate, whether he feels like it or not. The house acts as a really powerful behavioral tool that quite literally saves you from yourself.
So let's look at the ultimate checklist to evaluate your own reality here. Renting wins if you have the discipline to religiously invest the difference, if you move frequently, or if you live in an insanely highly priced market where the math just never crosses the line. On the flip side, buying wins if you plan to stay put for 7 or more years, if rents in your area are unusually high, or, and honestly this is the most important one, if you know deep down you won't actually invest your savings and you truly need that forced discipline.
So it all comes down to this one question. Did you run your own real numbers, or did you just pick a slogan? Neither renting nor buying is inherently a trap. Both Brian and Rachel succeeded beautifully because they executed their respective financial plans. The only real trap here is blindly following societal catchphrases like renting is throwing money away, instead of sitting down and doing the arithmetic for your own unique life. So take the time, run your own numbers. What path will you choose?